It's
cold in here.
I gave out this sheet, which I'm about to share on the screen. This is the original text. It copies very large from Safaria sometimes for some reason, but it's not a bad thing. And then so depending on how much time we spend on the original text, then we'll jump into Ruth Calderon's book. The story is simply called Nazir, the Nazarite. We'll talk a little bit about what a Nazir was. It doesn't get as racy as the last story, but it does have to do with temptations of the flesh. And the Nazarite is someone who abstains from certain pleasures, specifically abstaining from wine or grape product, and not becoming tameh, impure, and not shaving not cutting their hair. Yeah, those are the three. And we'll talk a little bit about what a Nazir is and why would someone become a Nazir, and what does this story have to say about the physical world and so on. The source of this story is actually not the Gemara, the Talmud. It is an earlier text called the Tosefta. So there are kind of three ingredients of earlier texts that end up into the Gemara. There's the Mishnah, the Braita, and the Tosefta. So I'll define these. So Mishnah we are familiar with. The Mishnah was codified around the year
600.
No, that's
Oh,
the
no,
whole Gemara.
200.
Yeah,
200.
yes. We were gonna get there.
Yeah.
So around the year 200 CE, the Mishnah is codified really as a book of law with some stories. Braitas are little snippets that are just as early as the Mishnah, but didn't get included into the Mishnah. We only end up finding them because they pop up being quoted as these other early texts. It might say Tana, it's a Tanaitic text, it's the same era of the Mishnah. They get brought into the Gemara text, but they're not from the Mishnah, so they're called a Braita, which kind of means an external text of same time frame.
How do you spell that?
Baraita, Baitta, Baraita. And the Tosefta is contemporaneous with, gosh, every time I date things, I think to myself, there is an academic somewhere who's going to tell me something that I don't know about. Actually, the way the Tosefta was dated was different from the Braita.
That's what your husband's for.
Right. So I
he's
always
the-
say with a bit, take it with a big historic grain of salt.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, Tosefta is a collection
Mhm.
of the same kind of Mishnaic era-ish.
What the name
a little bit
comes from,
earlier.
Tosef, is to
The
collect,
Hosif to Tosefta additional,
okay.
really.
To add to.
Yeah, a little bit more midrashic sometimes, like a little bit more story as opposed to the Mishnah, which is focused on legal ideas
Okay.
and organized by tract dates. And so the Tosefta, it's not as organized, not the same way that the Mishnah is. So we have a Tosefta here that didn't get pulled into the Talmud text, which is not unusual. Talmud is not recording every single thing in the Tosefta. It goes through by the Mishnah topics and quotes the whole Mishnah. But the Tosefta is an additional text around that time. So what that means, practically speaking, now we'll just get to the tachlis, right? The bottom line is that this is quite an early story. So it happened where we're going to see it's Rabbi Shimon HaTzadik, Simon the Righteous, says he dates, okay, depending on who you think he was historically, and the scholars will debate this, but let's just say around 200 BC. These are earlier texts.
Okay.
He appears in Pirkei Avot as the first name on the list in the Pirkei Avot, which is saying from Moses to Joshua to the elders to the and then the next name we get Shimon HaTzadik, Simon the Righteous. So he says he's Mishiarei Knesset Hagdolah. He's like the end of the era before we get to the beginning of the rabbinic era, the end of the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, which were like the proto rabbis. Now we're around 200 BCE. We didn't
That's
yet get to
400 years
the
before-
story of Hanukkah,
yeah,
but
yeah.
the story of Hanukkah is about to come. Still, the second temple is around. He's one of the high priests of the second temple. So all of this, if people feel, like they
Mhm.
want a historic
Time.
context,
Yeah.
this gives us a sense in broad strokes about where we are in time. And Shimon HaTzadik is going to talk about his experience as the high priest in relation to this
Okay.
Nazirite.
Hmm.
The Nazir, as we said, is kind of the Jewish version of an ascetic. We don't have monks,
Right.
right? We don't have people who should ideally kind of seal themselves away completely from the world. In fact, it's a great mitzvah to have children. It's a great mitzvah to be part of the world. And we'll see some of that in the text we look at after. And so Shimon HaTzadik doesn't really like Nazirites. He finds them, well, it doesn't tell us why.
Okay.
It just says, I never ate one of the offerings, the sacrifices that a Nazirite brought, except for one time. I don't usually like Nazirites, but this guy was an exception. I'll tell you why I liked him. So I'm going to share my screen for our Zoom friends. I just have to make sure I share the,
So Shimon was a Nazarite.
no,
No.
he was the high priest who's about to meet a Nazirite that he
Okay.
actually is impressed with. He's usually unimpressed by Nazirites. Thank you for clarifying. As I'm sharing this, other questions or clarifications about anything we've said so far?
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and you can squeeze that in so we see everybody. All right. So you see on the top of this source sheet, it says Tosefta. So it's from the Tosefta, an early Tannaitic era source from the Tractate of Nazir, chapter 4:6. I don't know why that didn't print on this.
Yeah.
It's okay. We're listening
All
to
right.
you.
And I know we have some friends who appreciate the Hebrew, so I'll read it in the Hebrew. We translate simultaneously, and everyone should follow along with how they feel comfortable. Amar Rabbi Shimon HaTzadik. Rabbi Simon the Righteous said, Mi yamai, in all of my life, lo achalti asham nizirut, I never ate of the guilt offering of a Nazir, ella achat, except for only one. So a little background. Why is a Nazir bringing an offering? He was bringing an offering when he completes his Nazir vow. Usually someone would say, I vow a Nazirite vow for 1 month, or I vow a Nazirite vow for 1 year. It was like in vogue in all like society, religions, whatever, to refrain from pleasures as a spiritual expression.
But can it be like Lent?
So-
It's a period of time. You
Yeah.
don't have to commit your whole
Yeah,
life.
it's
to
not
it.
forever.
Okay.
It's not forever. In fact, the only Nazir for life, who is even what they call Nazir mibeten, Nazir in
Yes,
utero,
yeah.
was
Samson,
Samson,
yeah.
Shimshon, Samson,
Yeah.
The son of
Clip the hair.
Yeah, exactly.
The mother, right?
Yeah.
Dedicated.
Eshet Manoach.
The
Eshet
son of
Manoach.
Han, the son of Han.
Sorry, what's that, Annie?
Was he the son of Hannah?
Manoach, I think. Manoach. Chana, I almost said Chana, but she was Shmuel.
Yeah. that's
So
right.
it's Manoach and Eshet Manoach, but she doesn't have a name. His mother. So thank you though. But yes, it was ordained from birth that Samson would be a Nazir for life, but that was really
Extreme.
yeah, an extreme and unusual. Nazirite vow was kind of a minimum of 1 month. If you just said, I vow to be
So
a
it's
Nazir,
like
the
Lent.
default was 1 month. Yeah, I guess it's
It-
Lent.
it is.
Isn't Lent
Lent.
40 days?
40 days.
Yeah, but it's
40
a
days is
period
also
of
a good
time where
biblical unit,
you
isn't it?
dedicate yourself to improving
Right.
one aspect of your
Right, to refraining
Yeah.
from something. So he says, I don't like to participate, Shimon HaTzadik says,
Mhm.
in these offerings from the Nazirs. Maybe it's a critique on the whole
concept.
discipline of Nizirut. But there was one Nazir who really impressed me, and I'm going to tell you about him. So maybe I'm trying to stick with the text first. What do we know from the text so far? He doesn't partake of Nazirim
Mhm.
except for this one. So maybe by learning about this one, we'll understand what was wrong with the other ones.
A guilt offering. So You were eating the,
Sorry, I didn't translate that, why a guilt offering is
Yeah.
described. So there are several categories of offerings. An asham, a guilt offering, was brought when someone did something sinful that could be rectified through a korban, through an offering. And it's understood that the Nazir, this is one of the rabbinic questions that come in these texts, like what's the Nazir
Right.
guilty of? If he completed his days of
because he didn't
Nazir,
enjoy life.
Mm.
Yeah.
he didn't
Mhm.
partake of the world.
Mhm. That's a sin.
And so maybe he had to do that for whatever reason, but he shouldn't have had to do that.
And then you
We-
were eating the sacrifice.
Yeah, so different sacrifices that were given to the Kohen. The daily offering, the Ola gets completely burnt up to God, and then some of them, like a portion of it gets given to the priest, and then the person eats the other portion, or some of it is burnt. It just different, it's kind of like different categories had different procedures.
And this rabbi didn't want to eat.
But he didn't want to partake of the part that was given to the Kohanim. I mean, it wouldn't just be, he was the high priest, wouldn't be just him on staff. There was a whole group of priests that would have, they had like shifts, like a 2-week shift of these priests, and then they go home, like they are all kind of
Like
drafted for 2
traveling.
weeks at a
traveling
time
priests?
from everywhere around the land of Israel. But the high priest, he stays
Hmm.
there. He is ensconced
Hmm.
in the temple all the time. And then there's shifts of Kohanim, of regular hediot, normal priests, who rotate through.
Okay.
So maybe everyone else would eat this Nazirite stuff, but he didn't want any part of it. So here's the story. Ma'aseh. Ma'aseh uba elai echad min hadarom. One Nazirite came to me from the south. Ure'itiv yefeh einayim v'tov ro'i. I saw that he was beautiful. He was attractive. He had beautiful eyes and a good countenance. Ukivutzotav taltalim, and flowing locks. That's a phrase for those who are our Shabbat regulars and sing Anim Zemirot with us.
Mhm.
Taltalim, kivutzotav taltalim, shechora. Do you recognize?
Yeah,
Like
but that's not
it's
how we respond. That's what
describing-
your daughter
Yeah.
sings. That's not my verse.
It's not your line. It uses a lot of these physical
Yes, you're
attributes to describe
absolutely right.
God,
Yeah.
metaphorically, of course.
Yeah.
All right, so I see this beautiful young man, like so striking. That's the first thing he sees about him. Namtilo,
Mhm.
I say to him, Mara'ita l'shachet se'ar zena'eh. Why are you gonna cut off such lovely hair?
Ooh.
That seems a little
Yeah.
out of character for the high priest, but
Yeah, it
something,
Sounds a
he
little-
takes notice of this young man in a new way, and maybe in a way he hadn't noticed any of the other Nazirites. It's not going to go in that direction. I'll just tell you, she doesn't think it does.
Wow, it's in the
But,
past.
yes.
It's in the past. On what account did you destroy it? If you destroyed it, you couldn't see the curly locks.
So thank you, David. Hi, David. We didn't say hello to you, and I appreciate that from Israel. You're talking about grammar, Hebrew grammar. That's good.
Well, the logic of it.
Yes. So the thing is that the cutting of the hair was usually part of the Nazirite ceremony that they would do in the temple. So I see it in the English, did you destroy? But in the Hebrew, I don't think it's so clear. Ma ra'ita lishachet. Why would you have seen to destroy such nice hair? I don't know if he already did it. He sees the hair, so he didn't cut it off yet.
Yeah, right.
It's actually a faulty translation now that I realize.
Would you? It should be, right?
Would
Yes,
you?
yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We got to write to Safaria. I don't know where they're getting, well, maybe this is Ruth Calderon's translation. No, Ruth Calderon in this copy, I mean, I didn't give it around yet fully to everyone, but it says, did you see fit to destroy? That's a good translation from Maryland. We'll get to this eventually. So I think that's really what it's saying.
Marilyn, you have
Thank
this
you
one?
for catching that. So why did you see fit to destroy this hair? Such lovely hair.
Mhm.
So he says, Gam liro ehayiti Be'iri. I was a shepherd in my city, in my town. Vehalachti limloot min hama'ayan mayim. I went to draw water from the spring. They translated here as river, okay? V'nistakalti, I looked, bibuvia sheli, at my reflection, upachaz yitziri alai, my desire was awakened within me. Like I saw my own beauty.
Narcissist.
It's the opposite, it's the opposite of narcissist.
So,
Well,
so
he
you're
had it.
talking about the
Oh,
Greek
yeah, his-
myth of Narcissus,
Narcissus, Narcissus.
thank you. And Ruth Calderon in her book actually acknowledges that and says these rabbis knew that myth, right? They are writing this tale
Post.
in the Greco-Roman time period. They know the story of Narcissus.
Mhm.
They're going to do their own version
Yeah.
of the myth of Narcissus.
Mhm.
So this young man, I knew someone would jump right on that. Leave it to you, Barbara. Saw his reflection in the water. And for those who are less familiar, and I'm not a Greek mythology
Mhm.
expert, but it's that the narcissist looks at his reflection in the water and is so overcome by his own image and is like frozen right on the spot, right? And stuck.
Well, he falls in love with his.
He falls in love with himself and then dies. So he sees his own reflection, this young man. Ufachaz yitziri alai, my yetzer, my desire, my impulse took over. Ubikesh laha'avireini min ha'olam, and sought to drive me from the world like Narcissus was.
Mhm.
But I wasn't gonna fall for that. So what did I do instead? So he interrupts that myth and has a different ending. Namti lo, I said to him, to who?
The reflection.
To the reflection, maybe to the Yetzer Hara,
Yeah, yeah.
to the evil impulse. Rasha, you wicked one. Lo haya lecha lehitgarot. You shouldn't be prideful ela b'davar she'eno shelcha, in this thing that is not yours.
Mm.
You didn't create your own good
Yeah.
looks. And b'davar she'ati la'asot afar rima v'tot le'a, and something that is fleeting in the future, it will be to dust and worms and corruption. Why did they translate that corruption? Worms, maggots. I mean, that's the
Corruption
term.
is the disintegration,
Yeah.
literally.
Oh, that's what that
disintegration.
means. Yeah, and Calderon's translation is dust, worms, and maggots. So that's
Yeah.
what I said.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Rupto is to rupture.
Yeah.
So corruption is.
Yeah, that's fair. They don't mean corrupt. They mean disintegrate.
Disintegrate.
So you're being caught up in this like fleeting pleasure of the world and your own image. Hare alai legalcha l'shamayim. I take it upon myself to cut you off or to shave you for the sake of heaven.
Mm.
And so that's the end of the story. And now Shimon HaTzadik, Simon the righteous, the high priest, responds. So he says, the reason I've decided to cut my hair is I'm too wrapped up in my own beauty. I'm too wrapped up in the physical, and I need to get rid of this, which is ironic because the whole point of the Nazirite vow was to become more spiritual, but I guess he's realizing it backfired. It wasn't serving its purpose. And now Shimon HaTzadik says, Himachti et roshi unishaktiv.
Mhm.
I patted Roshi, my head. And she says here, his head. But Hamachti at Roshi lowered. Yeah, I lowered my head. I bent over and kissed him. Ve'amarti kamotcha yirbu. May there be many like you. Osei ritzon makom beYisrael. Those among Israel who are doing the will of God. Alecha nitkayem zeh shene'amar. It is with you that the verse about the Nazirite is truly upheld. Someone like you deserves to be a Nazirite. And then the quote from the book of Numbers, Ish o isha ki yafli lindor neder nazir lahazir lahashem. With someone who wants to make a Nazirite vow to God. That's the end of the narrative. So he says, you're what the Nazirut was supposed to be about. All those other people, I don't know, they're doing it to show off, they're doing it for the wrong reasons, they're doing it and they don't really understand it. You who are ending your Nazirite vow, you kind of get what this is supposed to be all about. Yeah.
So I have a question on that, because if you truly can eschew anything that is prideful and about yourself, you should be able to have long, beautiful hair, but not let it consume you and not let it distract you from other
Yeah.
loftier thoughts. So, I mean, the fact that he cut his hair off is, to me, it was recognizing his own weakness at not being able to not pride
Yeah,
himself on his looks.
I think that he
So
appreciates his honesty.
well,
like
but
his
I'm just saying it could be read,
self-awareness.
it could be read a different way, because the other Nazarites perhaps didn't fall in love with their good looks.
Uh-huh.
They were able
Uh-huh.
to still stay the course.
So what do you think he's saying to this young man?
No, I'm arguing what he's saying. He's saying, oh, bravo for you. You removed the temptation. But
Right,
I'm saying if you're able to withstand the temptation, that's a higher level
Yeah.
of purifying
then you
yourself.
could, you mean the person who could truly be a spiritual Nazarite
Exactly. wouldn't-
despite their long hair. But maybe
exactly.
not everybody has such beautiful locks like this.
But
guy.
it doesn't matter. It's that you should be
It-
looking outward,
But
not.
remember, in the
not at
ancient
yourself.
world, to have unkempt hair, it's actually a disgrace to the physical body. It's not meant to be something beautiful. It was the opposite. It was let your hair grow, like not care for the physical, don't drink wine, separate yourself from all impurities. And
Well-
so I think it flips it on its head saying, yeah, but his hair was gorgeous.
What about Samson's hair? Was his strength?
Yeah, Samson, well, he's also vain.
He gets.
He
into
gets
all kinds of-
entangled.
Yeah.
No, I have
Delilah.
a question. I have a question too.
Please, David, yeah.
Yeah, have there ever been female Nazarites? It says a man or a woman.
There certainly can be, and I would imagine there were, because right from the start in the verse of the Torah, it says a man or woman, ish o isha,
Mhm.
any person of any gender.
Yeah, have you ever heard? Have we
I
heard
don't-
of a female
No,
Nazarite?
I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. I don't know. It's a good question
Well, what woman wants to cut her hair off?
at the end of it.
Sinead O'Connor.
Yeah, it's very
She
hip.
was.
Any other thoughts or questions from the Zoom room before we move forward?
I looked up narcissist and this is the picture that came up.
Oh, wait, let's see. Can we make it big? Hold it up, Terry.
It's the man looking at his reflection in the mirror.
Yeah, there we go.
There he is.
Yeah, short hair.
He has short
He's
hair.
beautifully
It says
androgynous.
it's Caravaggio.
If you
Oh,
look at it, yeah.
awesome.
I kind of think it's hanging down his back.
Okay,
Yeah, it looks long.
Yeah.
It's so
yeah, yeah.
interesting.
You know, paintings always reflect their own era's
right.
sartorial
Terry.
and
Style, yeah.
It's
So,
1597 to 99 by Caravaggio.
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 The man in love with his reflection.
We know lots
Um,
like that.
How do I get back to the owl screen being, here we go, spotlight for everyone, that's what I want to do, okay. So, we get back to the gallery. Oh. Can you push gallery until it actually does it? So, this source sheet that I had found on Safaria, thank you to the person who put it together, brought the verses in the Torah, the original verses that talk about the Nazir. And so it's worth looking and seeing the original context of what a Nazir was and how it's described. So this is just by way of a little bit more background to the story. So again, we're now rewinding, another few thousand years to the actual Torah text. And it is in verse 2, right? Speak to the Israelites, say to them, Ish o Isha. This is the verse that was being quoted in our story. Ish o Isha, man or woman, ki aflilin dor neder, Nazir, who wants to do a Nazirite vow, to Nazir himself or herself to God. So it was like a sign of devotion to God. Here's what they do. verse 3, miyayin v'shechar yazir, they refrain. And even that word nazir is like the verb here. They nazir themselves, they abstain from wine and other intoxicants and all these vinegars and even grape and raisin, everything. For however long they are the nazir, their vow lasts through the term, verse 5, kol yemei neder nizro, all the days of their Nazirite vow. Ta'ar lo ya'avor al rosho, you should not bring a razor to his head, don't shave your head, don't cut your hair until the end of that time you have vowed. And also in verse 6, kol yemei his haziro Lashem al nefesh met lo yavo, don't come near to a dead body,
Mhm.
which would make you impure. What does that remind you of? Who
The
doesn't come?
Kohanim.
Yes, a Kohen doesn't come in contact with a deceased, doesn't go to a cemetery. So my whole family are Kohanim, and my father was in the funeral because it's his immediate relative, but all the grandsons stay outside of the
Oh,
Kohen room.
Mhm.
And they're used to it.
Yes,
please.
yeah, yeah.
And in fact, it's the only 2 funerals my father has ever been to, his
Mhm.
mother
Wow.
and
His
20 years ago, his father.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is kind of like someone wanting to be a quasi Kohen.
Mhm.
They weren't born into that restriction, but they take it on.
Were
for
you supposed to
extra-
isolate yourself?
No, it just means don't go
Don't be
into
in
a
the presence
cemetery,
of it.
don't help bury the dead, don't be involved with the deceased.
Okay.
And so for a Kohen, they're not allowed to be involved in any deceased except their immediate relative.
But
If
this
it's
one
a
is
father, a
even his
mother.
father or mother. I mean, that's even more strict than.
Yeah,
Kohen.
that's right. That puts him in a Kohen Gadol category, actually,
Oh.
a high priest category, which is interesting given the exchange between this young man and the high priest. And then if he ends up accidentally becoming impure, he basically has to finish his Nazirite vow in the middle of it.
Yes. I
It's
feel it too.
cold.
It is cold. It's strange that the
Can
fan
we
is
turn
on.
down the vent or? no,
I
we
don't
can't do that?
know how to, it's not controlled in this room.
Okay.
Anyway, whenever his Nazirite time is either interrupted or completed, then he has a ceremony, goes to the temple and he brings this offering, and you can see at the bottom of that text, verse 11, the priest offers one as these 2 birds. He brings these 2 birds offerings. One is a sin offering, one is a burnt offering, and the sin offering isn't burnt up in totality. So that would, I believe that would be the one that the priest could eat from. And that's kind of the end of his Nazirite vow.
Mhm.
Yeah, this goes on a little bit further. So I appreciated also the creator of this sheet. It said it at the top, Dan Selsberg. Thank you, Dan Selsberg. But in our photocopy, it just said yes.
Mhm.
He also gives us the last text on this sheet. He gives us what you just said about why don't we like Nazirs? Why does he need to bring a guilt offering? So this is the Rambam Maimonides. This is the very last sheet in our booklet for those here in person, where it says Rambam, and then there's a lot of Hebrew, but the same thing is translated on the next page in English. Flip to the last, yeah, exactly there. And for our, on Zoom, it's gonna be a little bit harder because it's up and down like this. So I'm
So
gonna keep it
just
on the
do the
Hebrew and
English.
translate as we go. No, it's nice, it's nice. Some people appreciate the Hebrew.
I do.
And then I'll scroll it back all the way down and then look at the English after. So what have we seen? We've seen that there is a procedure for being a Nazir. The text of the Torah itself doesn't place any positive or negative value. If you want to be a Nazir, here's the procedure. Here's what you abstain from. Here's how you finish it. But the fact that it's an asham, a guilt offering, makes us take pause. And this happens to be the Rambam Maimonides, but it's not just the Rambam. He's a foundational text. Remember, the Rambam is 13th century Spain, one of the greatest leaders and doctors and philosophers of all time. And in the very beginning of his magnum opus, his Mishnah Torah, before he gets to a lot of the laws, he does a kind of, here are some of the character traits that a person should embrace. And his whole approach is the golden mean. Don't be to this extreme or to that extreme. Except for anger, he says, never be angry. That you should be an extreme. Okay, and a couple other things like that. And then he kind of takes aim at this asceticism trend. He doesn't like it. So this probably will mean that we'll do Ruth Calderon's story next time, which is fine. Let's spend a little time with the Rambam because it's the Rambam. Because why not? So I'm starting right from the beginning. Shema Yomar Adam. If a person were to say, Ho'il, since the jealousy and temptation and honor, these are motzi'im et ha'adam min ha'olam. They remove a person from the world. Then you know what? I'm going to remove myself completely from anything that is honorable or indulgent. Efrosh mehen biyoter ve'etrachik l'tzad ha'acharon. Tzad ha'acharon means the extreme end. And therefore, this person who doesn't want to give in to temptation, as a result, in the English he says as a result, and in the Hebrew it's ad, until, shelo yochal basar, he won't eat meat, v'lo yishta yayin, he won't drink wine, v'lo yisa isha, he won't get married, v'lo yeshev b'dira na'ed, he won't sit in a nice, live in a nice house, v'lo yovash malbush na'ed, won't wear nice clothing. Ela hasak v'hatzemer hakashed, like a sackcloth and hard wool. He's describing monks. Oh, this just ... here in the English. Sorry.
Yeah.
So on the booklet, it's the very last sheet in the English, Marilyn. So are you following the Hebrew?
Yes, I just had a question. If I
Okay.
could interrupt.
I'm just realizing that the English skipped a few of those words. That's why. Yeah.
Would you please tell me why some of the Hebrew is in bold?
I think that's just our friend who made the source sheet wants to highlight the significant sentences. It's the editor.
Where does it say he's not to get, is celibacy part of it? Because I'm not seeing a number.
To take a wife or live. No, he's not describing the Nazarite just yet. He's describing in general terms. You know, some people think that the world is too tempting. So they go and live alone and become a monk. He's saying.
But Numbers doesn't say.
No,
Right,
no.
okay.
But he's gonna bring the Nazir as a proof text that we don't think you should abstain from nice things. You have to go bring a sin offering for abstaining from wine.
Yeah.
Do you see where he's going? This is not yet about the Nazir, but he's going to mention the Nazir by the by as a proof text.
Okay.
Thank you for helping me clarify that. And Marilyn.
Would you please tell me which of the English words would be the equivalent of those in Hebrew that have been put into?
Yes. When we get there, I'll tell
Thank
you
you.
exactly. Yes. So in the English, it's at the, what's that called again?
Le trois points.
Yeah, what's it called?
Suspension points.
No. Ellipsis, no, ellipsis?
Ellipsis?
Ellipsis, that's the ...
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, ellipsis.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. There's a Zoom delay, but he got it.
Yeah.
So
You had to wait for the 3.
So I'm at the ellipsis on the English for those of us in the physical room. I know that well, I can't get all of it to fit because he didn't do it side by side on this sheet. Our friend Dan. Okay. But it's all of these things he doesn't want to do. And instead he's wearing sack and woolen, I don't know, unpleasant clothing. V'chayotze bahem.
Itchy clothing.
Yeah, I was
And
just gonna
yeah,
say,
Like a hair shirt.
yeah.
And then
yeah.
he said, Kegon, like kohanei ha'odei kochavim, like pagan priests.
Oy, oy.
So he says, now we're back in the English. This is too bad. He says, Gam ze derech ra'ah.
Mhm.
This too is bad, excuse me. This also is bad. It's bad to get caught up in like
Extremes.
desires and temptations, but this too is bad. This is the opposite
Yeah.
extreme. Ve'asur leilechba, you are forbidden to go along this path. Now here's the bold.
Mhm.
Whoever does so is called a sinner. Hamehalech b'derech zo nikra choteh. So the way that he's going to prove that, Maimonides, is by showing you that the Nazir is bringing a sin offering. So he's going to get there. Shaharehu omer ben Nazir. It says with regards to the Nazirite, v'chaper alav me'asher chata al hanefesh. He must atone for a sin, for his sin against the soul. Amru chachamim, the sages said, Ma im nazir shalo piresh ela min hayayin tzarich kapara. Given that a nazir who only abstained from wine, not all the other nice things I just described, like women and clothing, hamonea atzmo b'kol davar v'davar achal achat kama v'kama. How much more so if someone abstains from all those other legitimate pleasures. And now this next bold in the Hebrew is therefore the sages commanded
Mhm.
in the English. Lefichach tzivu chachamim. The sages have commanded shelo yimena adam atzmo ela midvarim shenimna'ato haTorah bilvad. Don't abstain from things other than what the Torah told you to abstain from. Like, isn't it enough that you're not allowed to eat shellfish? Why are you also not having
Having
a
herring.
wonderful steak that's kosher, right? Isn't it enough that you're not allowed to sleep with multiple wives? Well, going back to last week.
Yeah.
But isn't it enough that, the Torah forbids certain relationships? Why should you forbid yourself from all relationships? It says, "V'lo yahe oser atzmo b'nedarim u'v'shvuot al dvarim hamutarim." That's the rest of the sentence on the bold. You shouldn't, and it didn't even make it into
Yeah.
this English. Shouldn't make all these other vows. Like, it was really in vogue. That's how people expressed their spirituality. And he's saying that's nonsense.
Mhm.
You don't need to make extra vows to abstain from things that are permitted. Didn't the Torah forbid enough things? It wasn't it enough that the Torah forbade you? Now you're forbidding to yourself more things. That's not the Torah way. You should embrace legitimate pleasures. Don't make yourself overly righteous. I'll pause there. And so Maimonides uses the Nazirite to explain, we don't want to be ascetics. Even the Nazir who refrains from an itty bitty thing like wine, we're not so on board with that. And it's possible that what Ruth Calderon is going to do with this will have this in mind. Like, why is he so upset or dismayed with all these other Nazirs? Why is this guy different? Did you want to?
I've actually never noticed that in the Torah, it says a man or a woman. I'm actually very struck by that because
it's so rare.
yeah, it's very rare, but it also kind of, first of all, it seems to assign an equal function to a woman having the same sort of obligation in terms of dedication to the Lord.
Right.
When we have always
Right.
said, okay, women have equal value, but different functions, division of labor, all that's always been a very kind of Jewish thing. And here,
Yeah.
so it comes as sort of a shock to me. And
I
then, of
think
course,
that
it's not amplified anywhere. It just,
So those distinctions of what women are obligated in and men are obligated and women are not, those are in the rabbinic text.
yes, I know that, but
So
I mean,
the
even in the
biblical
Torah,
text, that's interesting to think about. That does the biblical text really believe that male and female spirituality are equal.
This
I'm
seems
thinking
to
of other
imply-
places in the Torah where it could express it's like a spiritual expression, a spiritual longing like this. I don't know.
But even so, if it was for, I find it interesting that, yes, both could be a Nazir,
Yeah.
but then, of course, we see no amplification of what it would mean to be a woman that does all these things, like cuts off her hair and.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
don't think it matters.
No, it doesn't.
Isn't that the point? Is that what you were gonna say? Like,
I was going to say
yeah,
that it has to do with avoiding hubris and to being humble. Within that context, you apply it as appropriate to whatever gender, but it doesn't really matter. It's a human being. that you're
right.
talking
Any
about.
human being who
Mhm.
feels this is gonna be a meaningful experience can do this. And none of these are gender-based.
Yeah.
And
Still then.
no, because we don't have the rituals of getting out of it. We just end up annulling our vows every Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur anyway. And so like, we don't encourage vows. And then if we accidentally vow something we wouldn't want to vow, we get rid of it by the end of the year. So
And we also say sometimes Bali Neder when we're saying certain things.
yeah, yeah. I seem to remember some legend of like the Nazir of Jerusalem, some modern person who Nazired themselves. I can't remember where I'm coming up with that. Yeah,
I think, I don't know, I'm reading it, it's kind of a perversion of what the original laws have been in terms of being an observant good Jew, you know? It's like,
Mm.
I'm going to one up it, which is kind of perverse because instead of being modest, you're saying, I'm going to be even better than the most religious Jew that God is expecting, which it's not necessary because
Right.
God wants you to enjoy the life that has been given you. So, you know, to me, it's a perversion. That's that.
the Nazir of Jerusalem. Rav Kook's most prominent disciple, Rabbi David Cohen, was known as Harav HaNazir. He passed away in 1972. So this is maybe the person I was just thinking of. And he was known as the Nazarite rabbi, a Jewish ascetic, took the Nazarite vow when World War I broke out. Here's a picture of him with his long
Flowing
hair and
locks.
beard. Not so,
Flowing
I mean,
That's all good looking. This one.
not me. Yeah,
Anyway,
He was
I
born
think
in
it's what
Lithuania.
we would call
Okay, so
wretched
this is-
excess.
It's still.
You
it
don't
was-
need
it was
to
not
be a
that much.
Nazarite.
yeah, but
to be a
I
good
mean,
person.
this
It's
is one
rare,
guy
yeah.
that we know of. And I
What do you think? Philip?
wanted to see if there was anything about it. Is this fun? Different.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a lot to digest.
it's a lot.
I
Well-
think-
Yeah, please.
Sorry, I'm just thinking about the existentialist balance in life, where you're always trying to have that mean. I mean, I guess I'm going to
Mhm.
Aristotle, but I think that's what
Yes.
he's trying to say.
Maimonides is Aristotelian.
Ah,
Absolutely.
The middle road.
The
okay.
first time I studied Maimonides was with a
Yeah.
teacher who first spent 2 months teaching us
Okay,
Aristotle.
so
Oh.
that makes
And-
sense.
and then-
So it has to do with.
and
the
then
balance
told
of the
us
world.
This is where Maimonides is coming out of. Yes, yeah.
Okay, so do not appropriate to yourself what has already been defined. It's,
Mhm.
you're taking on a God-given, well, sorry for the
Yeah.
excess language. However,
No,
you are taking upon yourself a responsibility that is not yours to.
well, it is like playing God.
Exactly.
If we
It's-
believe that
it's
God restricts us
it's
from this or
perverse.
that, who are you to restrict
It's
us from
extreme.
more?
Yeah.
And so it's out of balance, it's inharmonious.
Yeah. I'm tempted to just get us a flavor of the story before we end, even though we won't have time for it. But I want you to just hear how.
You're gonna do it
this
next
is
week,
from-
aren't you?
Yeah, next week we'll do it. You can take it home and read it.
Mhm.
For those who are here gathering, I'm trying to like tempt them all to come in person by giving
Me
us
too.
things. So, not you, Max. It's a long way from Chicago every week. I'm gonna share my screen. I want to make sure I do it right.
Further for me.
Oh, yeah, you too, David. But you went the right direction. We can't fault you for that. Here we are, okay. So Ruth Calderon quotes our text. And then where she goes is to start by bringing us into the world of Shimon HaTzadik. And he seems disillusioned with all of this whole priest stuff. And he's gonna be inspired by this Nazir. So we'll just read the first paragraph and then leave us wanting more, okay? The temple stood silent. I'm right here on the bottom of the first super. I got it. The high priest, Shimon the righteous, was accompanied by the patter of his own footsteps on the stone floor as he traversed the great holy space. He marched forward, enveloped in darkness and cold, as in a cave of marble and stone. As he walked, his heart fluttered on account of the cold and his cough and his general sense of discomfort. Ugh.
That's me going to the bathroom in the middle.
I'm gonna leave you wanting more. You can read it. But what's interesting right away is that where the story begins in the narrative text is with his kind of declaration. I never eat from Nazir offerings, except once. Let me tell you about this. So our friend Ruth takes us first into like, what mood is he in? What's been going on? Poor Shimon HaTzadik. He's actually, so I didn't mention this before, he's one of the greatest, one of the most righteous. It's in the time of Alexander the Great, who's conquering everything, and he prevents Alexander from conquering Jerusalem. And he has this relationship with Alexander and says, I promise you, everybody will name their child Alexander, if only you leave Jerusalem alone. That's why many Jewish men were named Alexander.
Oh, really?
According to the legend.
Wow, that's
That's not a bad name.
So he's holding down so much for this nation, but they're alone.
And now everybody talks to
cold.
Alexa.
It's
My granddaughter.
it's a rough day. Yes, any
No, I'm
other
talking about the Alexa in your house.
thoughts or?
From the beginning of the class, when it starts with Shimon the righteous, it's killing me, it's nagging at me. Where do I know? Shimon had said it. He used
From
to say,
Pirkei Avot.
that's what I thought.
It's
was
the very
that's what I
beginning of
thought.
Pirkei Avot.
That's what.
So Pirkei Avot, the first mission of Pirkei Avot says, Moshe kibel Torah Sinai, right? Moses got the Torah from Sinai, gave it to Joshua. Joshua gave it to like, instead of saying I can just read it out. But it's Moshe kibel Torah Sinai, u'misarad liYeshua, v'Yeshua lizkenim. I had to memorize this. Lizkenim neviim, neviim l'Israel, anshe knesset hagdolah. Okay, so Moses, I just can't say it out in English. Moses received the Torah from Sinai, transmitted it to Joshua, Joshua to the elders to the prophets to the great assembly. Anshe Knesset Hagdolah.
Okay.
They taught, be patient in justice, have many disciples, make a fence around the Torah.
Pirkei Avot.
Pirkei
Some
Avot
of
number
the- good for
2,
you. Some of the
Shimon
good ones were
HaTzadik,
there, and they're stuck
and
in
the
here.
last of the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, and he taught Al Shlosha Dvarim
All three things the
La
Lord
Torah
said.
v'yala v'dav.
There it is.
There you go, Sandra. Yes.
That's
Who is
been
the one?
killing me the whole morning. I came up with Pirkei, but I could never remember
Very
which one.
impressed.
It's
Who was the one that
chapter
said,
I was there.
Mishnah 2. So then
who was the one that said to Alexander the Great that if you?
Yes,
Jerusalem-
that's
Who
him,
was the
that's
one?
him. That's
Who?
him. That's Shimon.
Ah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I want to just translate it for people who don't know the Hebrew that we threw out. That then he teaches, Rabbi Shimon HaTzadik teaches, the world stands upon 3 things: upon Torah, upon service, and upon acts of kindness. Service usually meaning either prayer or temple
Yes.
service, and acts of loving kindness. Give me Ruth Chesed.
Yeah.
So this is our Shimon HaTzadik.
Good.
He's a lofty man, and yes, he was the first. He's the
killing me.
first one mentioned in all of Pirkei Avot, ethics of the fathers. On that note,
You can sleep tonight.
now you can see.
Thank you.
So next week we'll go into the creative rendering of this story. Are you still going to be here? Yeah, one more week. We can keep you one more week.
I think so. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see.
You know, Raquel, you're like Scheherazade. You're telling us of 1,001 stories and we were hanging on.
That's it,
Oh,
that's it. Wait.
That's right.
Spotlight, so everyone there can see each other also. So.
But she writes beautifully.
She
Oh
does
my
such a
God.
nice job.
It's just, it's,
Next week, yeah. but-
it's so visual, she writes, visual and visceral.
But this is not
have a
gonna miss.
question.
We might, no, we're not gonna miss you this report. Okay, good. We're good all the way through, God willing,
Good.
these Wednesdays. I mean,